My hands trembled as I stared at my daughter Sarah across our Chicago kitchen table. "Yesterday?" I repeated, the word catching in my throat like broken glass. The graduation dinner I'd been planning for months, the celebration I'd saved every penny for, had already happened without me. The morning light filtered through our small apartment windows, casting long shadows across the scratched linoleum floor. I could hear Mrs. Peterson upstairs arguing with her husband again, the sound of sirens in the distance, the constant hum of city life that never seemed to pause for personal heartbreak. Sarah's eyes darted away from mine, her fingers nervously twisting the acceptance letter from Northwestern University. The cream-colored paper looked so pristine, so expensive, nothing like the community college brochures that had been scattered across our coffee table just months ago. "Dad, I tried calling you, but..." Her voice trailed off, and I knew exactly what she meant. I'd been working double shifts at the construction site, my phone dead in my locker while I hammered away at someone else's dream home. "I worked 16 hours yesterday to pay for that dinner," I said quietly, feeling the weight of every missed moment crushing down on me. My back still ached from carrying steel beams up 3 flights of stairs. My hands were still stained with concrete dust that never seemed to wash out completely. "I wanted to celebrate your scholarship, your future." The silence stretched between us like the years I'd spent trying to make up for being a single father who was always chasing the next paycheck. Outside our small apartment window, the October wind rattled the glass, matching the storm building in my chest. Chicago in autumn was unforgiving. Gray skies that seemed to press down on everything, cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there. I remembered when Sarah was 12, asking me why I couldn't come to her school play. I'd been working overtime to pay for her orthodontist appointments. She'd smiled then, understanding in that way kids do when they love their parents unconditionally. But that understanding had eroded over the years, worn away by missed birthdays, canceled plans, and promises I couldn't keep. Sarah finally looked up, tears glistening in her brown eyes that reminded me so much of her mother's, not Jennifer's, eyes. Her biological mother, Rosa, who died when Sarah was 3. Rosa's eyes held warmth and forgiveness. Jennifer's eyes, I'd learned too late, held calculation. "Mom organized it," she whispered. "She said you probably wouldn't have time anyway." My ex-wife, Jennifer. Even after 5 years of divorce, she still knew exactly how to cut deepest. She'd remarried a successful lawyer, moved to the suburbs, and somehow convinced our daughter that I was the one who chose work over family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, trying to prove I could provide for Sarah, only to lose her to someone who'd never missed a meal to pay rent. "Did you want me there?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Sarah's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to wait by the window for me to come home from work. "Of course I did, Dad. But when you didn't answer..." "Your phone. Richard said maybe it was better this way, less awkward for everyone." Richard, her stepfather, the man who'd swooped in with his perfectly pressed suits and unlimited bank account, making me look like exactly what I was. A broke construction worker who couldn't compete with private school tuition and European vacations. I pulled out my cracked smartphone, seeing 17 missed calls from yesterday. 17 chances to be the father she deserved, lost to concrete and steel and the desperate need to prove I could provide for her. Each missed call felt like a small death, a moment of her life I'd never get back. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." I began, but she was already standing, grabbing her backpack, the expensive one Jennifer had bought her, nothing like the second-hand bag I'd found at Goodwill when she started high school. "I have to go. Mom's picking me up for college shopping." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "Dad, I know you're trying, but trying isn't always enough." The door closed with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot through my empty apartment. I sat there for a long time, staring at the Northwestern acceptance letter she'd left behind, reading about merit scholarships and bright futures that somehow didn't include me. But what Sarah didn't know was that yesterday, while she was celebrating without me, I'd discovered something that would change everything about our family's story. Something that would force me to choose between losing my daughter's love and letting innocent families suffer in silence. Hey, comment below and let me know where you're watching this video from. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the manila envelope I'd hidden in my bedroom dresser, wedged between old tax returns and Sarah's elementary school report cards. The apartment felt different now, emptier somehow, as if Sarah's disappointment had physically removed something from the air. The radiator clanked and hissed, a sound I'd grown accustomed to over the years, but which now seemed almost deafening in the silence. Outside, I could hear the elevated train rumbling past, carrying people to jobs and lives that didn't involve choosing between rent money and graduation dinners. Yesterday, during my lunch break at the construction site, I'd received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Johnson, a private investigator I'd known since high school, had tracked me down with information I never asked for but desperately needed. We'd met at Sal's Diner on Western Avenue, the same place where we used to grab coffee after our factory shifts 20 years ago, back when we thought we understood how the world worked. Marcus looked different now, older, grayer, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. But his eyes still held that intensity I remembered from our youth, when we'd talk about fighting injustice and making the world better for working people like our fathers. "Your ex-wife's new husband," Marcus had said, sliding the envelope across the sticky diner table. "Richard Blackwood. He's been embezzling money from his law firm's client trust accounts. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars meant for working-class families fighting for compensation." My stomach had dropped as I opened the envelope, seeing bank statements, forged signatures, wire transfer records. The numbers were staggering. $50,000 from the Martinez family, whose father died in a factory explosion. $75,000 from elderly Mrs. Chen, whose husband was killed by a drunk driver. $120,000 from the Williams family, whose daughter died from a botched surgery. "How do you know this?" I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been investigating him for 6 months," Marcus replied, stirring sugar into his black coffee with methodical precision. "His firm represents families who've lost loved ones in workplace accidents, medical malpractice cases. Poor families, Mike. People like us who can't afford fancy lawyers, who trust the legal system to give them justice." Marcus's expression was grim. He's been stealing their settlements while they wait for justice that will never come. The weight of that revelation crushed me. Jennifer's lavish lifestyle, the designer clothes Sarah mentioned, the expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce, the college shopping trips that cost more than my monthly salary, all funded by money stolen from families who'd already lost everything. Marcus had continued, his voice growing harder with each detail. "The Gonzalez family, you remember? Maria? Her husband died in that scaffolding collapse at your site 2 years ago. She's still waiting for her settlement. Still working 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, taking care of her aging mother, trying to keep her twin boys in school. Richard's been telling her there are complications with the case while he funnels her money into offshore accounts. I remembered Maria's face the last time I saw her, exhausted and hollow-eyed, asking me if I knew anything about the legal process, if there was someone she could call to check on her case. I'd felt helpless then, unable to do anything but listen to her pain. Now, 12 hours later, I held proof that could expose Richard and potentially send him to prison. But using it would mean devastating Sarah's world, destroying the stability she'd found with her mother, the financial security that had given her opportunities I never could. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Thanks for understanding about yesterday, Dad. Richard is helping pay for my Northwestern tuition. Mom says you couldn't afford it anyway. I know you did your best, but this is my chance for a real future." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. My daughter's future was being built on stolen dreams of other families. Families whose fathers worked construction jobs like mine, whose mothers cleaned offices at night, whose children might never get their college dreams because a wealthy lawyer decided their settlements were his personal piggy bank. I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the fire escapes and brick buildings that made up my view. Somewhere out there was Maria, probably getting ready for her night shift, unaware that the money meant to secure her son's futures was paying for my daughter's education. I thought about the Thompson family, whose teenage son died from a misdiagnosed appendicitis. I'd seen them on the news, pleading for justice, trusting Blackwood's firm to represent their boy's memory. They had no idea their lawyer was stealing their son's worth piece by piece. The envelope seemed to burn in my hands. This wasn't just about my failed marriage anymore, or even about my relationship with Sarah. This was about justice for families who had no voice, no power, no private investigator friends to uncover the truth. This was about the system that was supposed to protect the vulnerable, but instead preyed on their desperation. But exposing Richard meant losing Sarah forever. She'd never forgive me for destroying her mother's happiness, for taking away the comfortable life she'd grown accustomed to. She'd see me as the bitter ex-husband who couldn't accept being replaced by a better man. The choice before me was impossible. My daughter's love or justice for the families being robbed blind while they grieved their dead. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maria Gonzalez's face when she came to my apartment 6 months ago, begging me to help her understand why her settlement was taking so long. Her hands had been cracked from cleaning chemicals, her English still broken after 20 years in Chicago, her faith in the American legal system absolute and heartbreaking. "Senor Mike," she had said, sitting on my worn couch while her twin, boys played quietly in the corner. "The lawyer, he says, is complicated, but it's been 2 years. My Roberto, he died because the scaffolding, it was no good. The company, they know was dangerous, but they know fix it. Now my boys, they ask when Papa's case will help us move to better neighborhood when they can have money for college like he want." Her husband Roberto had been a good man, always first to work, last to leave. He talked about his sons constantly, how Jose wanted to be a doctor, how Miguel dreamed of becoming an engineer. Roberto died trying to build other people's dreams while hoping his boys could build their own. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. I grabbed the envelope and drove through the morning rush hour traffic to the offices of the Chicago Tribune. The massive building stood like a fortress of truth in downtown Chicago, its windows reflecting the gray sky above. If I was going to destroy my relationship with Sarah, at least it would be for something that mattered. Jessica Chen, the investigative reporter, looked skeptical when I first approached her desk in the busy newsroom. Phones were ringing, keyboards clicking, the constant buzz of journalists chasing stories that might change the world or disappear by deadline. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers that suggested she still believed in the power of the written word. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair beside her cluttered desk. "What brings a construction worker to the Tribune on a Tuesday morning?" But as I spread out Marcus's evidence, bank records, forged documents, email, trails showing systematic theft, her expression shifted from polite skepticism to professional interest to genuine horror. She put on reading glasses and examined each document carefully, making notes in a shorthand I couldn't decipher. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said finally, looking up from a particularly damning bank transfer. "This shows systematic theft from at least 30 families over 3 years. We're looking at potential criminal charges, disbarment, and millions in restitution." She leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. "This isn't just embezzlement. This is a betrayal of the most vulnerable people in our legal system." "How long before you can publish?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the sleepless night. "With this evidence? I can have the story ready by tomorrow, maybe tonight if I can verify a few more sources. But I need to ask, what's your personal connection to Richard Blackwood? I explained everything. The divorce 5 years ago, Jennifer's quick remarriage to Richard, Sarah's growing distance from me, yesterday's missed graduation dinner, the college tuition money that would change my daughter's life. Jessica listened, without judgment, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed she understood the human cost of this story. Your daughter's tuition, she said carefully, setting down her pen. You understand that money will likely be frozen during the investigation? Student Financial Aid Office will be notified. The funds will be traced back to their illegal source. The weight of that reality settled on my shoulders like steel beams I'd carried up countless flights of stairs. Sarah would lose Northwestern. She'd lose the future Jennifer had promised her. She'd probably lose her faith in me too, seeing me as the vindictive father who destroyed her dreams out of jealousy. There's something else, Jessica continued, leaning forward with renewed intensity. We've been investigating workplace safety violations at construction sites around Chicago for months. Your daughter mentioned you work construction. The timing might not be coincidental. Would you be willing to speak about conditions at your site? I thought about the safety violations I'd witnessed daily, the corners cut to save money, the accidents that could have been prevented if supervisors cared more about worker safety than profit margins. My foreman, Tony Castellano, had been threatening workers who complained about unsafe conditions, telling them they'd be replaced by immigrants who wouldn't ask questions. There's more, I admitted, the words feeling like lead in my mouth. The scaffolding collapse that killed Maria's husband? It happened because my company, Midwest Construction, used substandard equipment to increase profits. Roberto and we reported safety violations for months, but anyone who speaks up gets fired or worse. Jessica's eyes widened as she scribbled notes faster. You're telling me there might be a connection between your daughter's stepfather's law firm and workplace safety violations at your construction site? Richard's firm represents the families of workplace accident victims. But what if they're also connected to the companies causing those accidents? What if they're making money on both ends, causing the accidents, then stealing from the victims' families? The room seemed to shrink as the full scope of the corruption became clear. This wasn't just about embezzlement anymore. This was about a system that profited from workers' deaths while stealing from their families. A web of greed that turned human tragedy into financial opportunity. Jessica leaned forward, her voice urgent. Mr. Rodriguez, would you be willing to go on record about the safety violations? Wear a wire to document threats from your foreman? Help us expose not just the embezzlement, but the entire network? I thought about Sarah, about our broken relationship, about the choice between being her hero or being a hero to families like Maria's. I thought about Roberto's dreams for his sons, about all the workers who died because safety was less important than profit. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. But I want to call my daughter first. I want her to hear this from me. Sarah answered on the first ring, her voice bright with the excitement I'd been trying to give. Her for 18 years. Dad, perfect timing. Richard just transferred money from my Northwestern deposit. I'm officially a wildcat. The joy in her voice was infectious, and for a moment I wanted to hang up, to let her keep this happiness even if it was built on lies. In the background, I could hear the sounds of wealth, classical music playing softly, the clink of expensive china, voices discussing summer vacation plans to Europe. It was a world I'd never been able to give her. A world that Jennifer had opened up through her marriage to Richard. Sarah, sweetheart, we need to talk. Can you meet me somewhere? Just us? I tried to keep the desperation out of my voice, but she knew me too well. I'm actually at the law firm with Mom and Richard. They're showing me around, talking about internship opportunities next summer. Her voice carried that happiness I'd been chasing for years, trying to create through overtime shifts and second jobs. Dad, I know you're upset about missing the dinner, but this is my future we're talking about. Richard says I could work here during college breaks. learn about law from the ground up. Through the phone, I could hear Jennifer's voice in the background, that tone she used when she wanted to sound supportive while delivering a subtle insult. Tell him we'll send pictures from the campus tour next week. Sarah, listen to me carefully. The money for your tuition, it's not what you think. Richard has been... I stopped, realizing that Jessica Chen was listening to every word, that this conversation would become part of her investigation. Dad, stop. Her voice turned cold, in that way that reminded me painfully of Jennifer during our divorce proceedings. I know you're struggling with me growing up, with me having opportunities you couldn't provide, but you can't sabotage my relationship with Richard just because you're jealous. I'm not jealous. I'm trying to protect you. Richard has been stealing money from families whose loved ones died in workplace accidents. The tuition money he's giving you was stolen from families like Maria Gonzalez, like the Thompsons, like dozens of others who trusted his firm to get them justice. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a construction site scaffold, waiting to fall. I could picture Sarah's face, the confusion and disbelief warring with the doubt she'd learned to feel whenever I made promises I couldn't keep. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and uncertain. Dad, that's a really serious thing to say. Do you have proof? Before I could answer, I heard Richard's voice in the background, smooth and concerned. Is everything okay, sweetheart? Who's on the phone? It's my father, Sarah said, and I heard the shame in her voice when she said it, the embarrassment of having to explain my existence to this man who'd become more of a father to her than I'd ever been. He's making up stories about you, Richard. He's talking to reporters. My blood ran cold. If Richard knew what I was planning, he could destroy the evidence, silence witnesses, move the money offshore, disappear entirely. Jessica Chen was frantically writing notes, gesturing for me to keep the conversation going. Sarah, don't tell him what I said. Please. Trust me just this once. But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. I'd asked her to trust me too many times when I couldn't follow through. Richard's voice came through the phone, clearer now, with that professional lawyer tone that could make threats sound like friendly advice. Mr. Rodriguez, this is Richard. Blackwood. Sarah's told me you're upset about missing her graduation dinner. I understand. It's hard when work demands interfere with family time. Perhaps we should meet face to face and discuss whatever concerns you have about my family. The emphasis on my family wasn't lost on me. In his mind, Sarah was already his daughter. I was just the biological inconvenience who paid child support. The line went dead, leaving me staring at Jessica Chen's increasingly worried expression. Mr. Rodriguez, that conversation just put you and your daughter in danger. If Blackwood knows, we're investigating him. My phone rang again before she could finish. This time it was Marcus, his voice urgent and frightened. Mike, get out of your apartment, now. I just got word that some of Blackwood's associates are asking questions about you around the neighborhood. They're not the kind of people who ask nicely. I grabbed the evidence envelope and my car keys, but Jessica stopped me at the door. Mr. Rodriguez, let us help you. We can put you in protective custody. Make sure you're safe while we publish the story. What about Sarah? What if he takes her somewhere I can't find her? We have contacts with the FBI. Financial crimes like this fall under federal jurisdiction. They can move fast if they need to. 20 minutes later, I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building, watching a black sedan with tinted windows circle the block. As I reached for my car keys, the sedan pulled up, blocking my exit. Two men in expensive suits got out, walking toward me with the casual confidence of people accustomed to making problems disappear. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated how far a father would go to protect not just his daughter, but all the daughters and sons whose families had been destroyed by their greed. They also didn't know that Jessica Chen had followed me and was already calling the FBI from her car across the street. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. This story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. I ducked between parked cars as the two men approached, my heart pounding against my ribs like a jackhammer on concrete. Years of construction work had taught me to think fast under pressure, to find escape routes when scaffolding collapsed or cranes malfunctioned. But this was different. This wasn't an accident waiting to happen. This was deliberate danger hunting me down. The parking garage beneath my building had a service tunnel I'd noticed during building maintenance, a narrow passage that connected to the subway system through the old Chicago Underground. I crawled beneath a pickup truck, ignoring the oil stains soaking through my jeans, and rolled toward the tunnel entrance as expensive leather shoes clicked against concrete behind me. "Mr. Rodriguez," one of them called out, his voice eerily calm, like a teacher calling attendance. "We just want to talk. Clear up some misunderstandings about your recent conversations." I made it to the tunnel entrance, a rusted door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" that I'd seen maintenance workers use. The darkness beyond was absolute, filled with the sound of dripping water and the distant rumble of trains. I pulled out my phone, grateful for the dim light of the screen, and called Marcus while I caught my breath in the damp darkness. "They found me," I whispered. "I'm in the service tunnel beneath my building. Two guys in suits looked like they meant business." "Stay there. I'm calling Detective Rivera. She's been investigating corruption cases like this for years. She's got connections with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit." Marcus paused, and I could hear him typing rapidly. "Mike, there's something else. We found more evidence while you were at the Tribune. Richard's been working with construction companies to cause accidents. Then his law firm swoops in to represent the families. They split the settlement money after skimming from both ends." The tunnel seemed to spin around me. "Maria's husband, Roberto, the scaffolding collapse. They planned it." "We think so. Midwest Construction received a large payment from one of Richard's shell companies 3 days before Roberto's accident. The scaffolding that collapsed? It was deliberately weakened. We have photographs of the bolts that were partially unscrewed, metal stress tests that show intentional sabotage." I closed my eyes, seeing Roberto's face the morning he died. He'd been joking about taking his boys to a Cubs game that weekend, talking about Jose's acceptance to community college, how proud he was that his son would be the first in their family to go to university. Roberto died because men in expensive suits saw profit in his death. "Mike, Detective Rivera wants to use you as bait. Get Richard to confess on tape. But it's dangerous. If he's willing to kill construction workers for insurance money, he won't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. I can't put Sarah in danger. Sarah's already in danger. Richard knows she's your weakness. He'll use her against you to keep you quiet, or worse, to make you disappear completely." I spent 40 minutes in that tunnel listening to the rats and the distant sound of my pursuers searching the parking garage above. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Chen. "FBI here, coast clear, meet at Federal Building." I emerged from the tunnel to find the parking lot empty, except for unmarked FBI vehicles and Jessica's sedan. Detective Rivera, a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much corruption, met me halfway across the lot. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, extending a firm handshake, "I've been investigating Richard Blackwood's operation for 8 months. Your evidence fills in the missing pieces of a conspiracy that reaches into City Hall, the construction industry, and the judicial system. What do you need me to do?" "Richard's arranged a meeting with you tonight at his law office. He thinks he can intimidate you into silence, maybe make you disappear like he did with a witness in Detroit last year." Detective Rivera's expression was grim. "We need you to wear a wire, get him to admit to the embezzlement, the workplace accident scheme, and hopefully something about witness elimination. And if something goes wrong? If he hurts Sarah?" Detective Rivera leaned against her car, studying me with those sharp eyes. "Mr. Rodriguez, we have evidence that Richard's been planning to leave the country. Tomorrow morning, he, your ex-wife, and your daughter have flights to the Cayman Islands. If he runs, Sarah goes with him, and all those families lose their chance at justice. Roberto's boys will never see a penny of their father's settlement. The weight of that reality crushed me. Sarah would disappear into a life built on blood money, never knowing that her college education was paid for with the deaths of men like Roberto. Maria would spend the rest of her life wondering why the American legal system failed her family. "I'll do it," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "But I want protection for Sarah. I want your word that if something goes wrong, you'll get her out safely. We'll have undercover officers in position throughout the building. The moment she's safe, we move in." Detective Rivera handed me a small device that looked like a pen. "This is military grade. It'll pick up conversations from 50 feet away. Whatever happens, don't let Richard know you're wearing it." 2 hours later, I stood outside Blackwood and Associates, a gleaming office tower in downtown Chicago that represented everything I'd never be able to provide for Sarah. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Richard waiting in his corner office, confident and relaxed, surrounded by law books and expensive art that had probably been purchased with stolen settlement money. The wire taped to my chest felt heavier than any tool I'd ever carried, heavier than the steel beams that had bent my back over 20 years of construction work. But this weight was different. It carried the hopes of families like Maria's, the memory of good men like Roberto, the future of children who deserved better than a system that profited from their parents' deaths. Richard had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how much a father would sacrifice for justice, not just for his daughter, but for every family that had been betrayed by his greed. Tonight, the lies would end, and the truth would finally have its day in court. I walked into Richard's office building with my hands visible, trying to project the defeated posture of a man who'd run out of options. The lobby was all marble and brass, with a security guard who looked like he'd played college football and a reception desk that probably cost more than my annual salary. Everything about the place screamed money and power and the kind of justice that only worked for people who could afford it. Richard's office occupied the entire corner of the 32nd floor, with windows overlooking the Chicago River and the kind of view that made you feel like you owned the city. He sat behind his mahogany desk like a king on his throne, Sarah sitting in a leather chair beside him, her eyes red from crying, but her posture defiant. The office walls were covered with diplomas, awards, photographs of Richard shaking hands with politicians and judges. On his desk sat a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid that probably cost more than most people made in a week. This was the world my daughter had chosen, the life I could never give her. "Dad," Sarah whispered when she saw me, but Richard held up a perfectly manicured hand to silence her. Even that gesture, the casual way he controlled my daughter's voice, made my blood boil. "Mr. Rodriguez," Richard said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. "I understand you've been spreading some concerning rumors about my business practices, talking to reporters, making wild accusations." His voice carried that educated East Coast accent that Jennifer had always admired, the sound of old money and Ivy League connections. Everything about him was designed to make men like me feel small and insignificant. "I want my daughter to leave. Then we can talk." Richard smiled coldly, the expression never reaching his ice-blue eyes. "Sarah is family. Now she stays." He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers like a professor delivering a lecture. "You see, Mike, may I call you Mike? You've stumbled onto some sensitive information about my operations. Information that could be misinterpreted by people who don't understand the complexities of legal practice." "Misinterpreted?" I kept my voice steady, knowing Detective Rivera and her team were listening through the wire taped to my chest. "You mean the $3 million you've stolen from accident victims' families? The money that should have gone to Maria Gonzalez? To the Thompson family? To dozens of other people who trusted you to get them justice?" Sarah's eyes widened, and I saw the first crack in the perfect world Richard had built around her. "Dad, What are you talking about? Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath the polished exterior. That's a very serious accusation, Mike. One that could land you in legal trouble for defamation. You're making claims without understanding the intricacies of settlement negotiations, the legitimate fees and expenses involved in complex litigation. Is that what you told Maria Gonzalez when she called asking about her husband's settlement? Or the Thompsons when they wondered why their son's death was worth so little? I leaned forward, letting some of my anger show. Did you explain the intricacies when you had Roberto Gonzalez killed for insurance money? The office fell silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Chicago traffic 32 floors below. Sarah looked back and forth between us, her world cracking apart in real time. Those families received fair compensation under the circumstances, Richard snapped, his composure finally starting to crack. The legal process is complex, Mike. Sometimes adjustments are necessary to ensure the greatest good for the greatest number. You wouldn't understand the ethical considerations involved in managing large settlements. Ethical considerations? I stood up, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You paid off construction companies to cause accidents, then stole money from the victims' families. You killed Roberto Gonzalez and then robbed his widow while she grieved. You call that ethics? Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard, is that true? Did you really? Richard's eyes hardened as he looked at my daughter, and for the first time, I saw him as the predator he really was. Sarah, your father is having a mental breakdown. The stress of poverty, of being unable to provide for you, of watching you succeed with my help, it's clearly affected his judgment. He's making desperate accusations because he can't accept that I'm a better father to you than he ever was. But I could see doubt creeping into Sarah's expression. The daughter I'd raised to question everything, to fight for what's right, was still in there beneath the expensive clothes and private school polish. Tell her about the Cayman Islands account, I pressed, knowing the FBI was recording every word. Tell her about the flights you booked for tomorrow morning. Tell her about the Detroit witness who asked too many questions and mysteriously disappeared. Richard's composure finally cracked completely. His face flushed red, his hands shaking, with rage as he stood up behind his desk. You've been very busy, haven't you, Mike? Unfortunately, you're also very naive. Do you think anyone will believe a failed construction worker over a respected attorney? Do you think your daughter will choose her loser father over the man who gave her a future? Actually, Detective Rivera's voice came from the doorway as she entered with 6 federal agents. We'll believe the wire recording he's been wearing for the past 30 minutes and the financial evidence he provided, and the testimony of 12 families you've been robbing for years. Richard lunged for his desk drawer, probably reaching for a gun or documents or a panic button, but the FBI agents were faster. As they cuffed him, he screamed threats about expensive lawyers and political connections that wouldn't help him now. Sarah ran to me, sobbing against my chest like she hadn't done since she was 12. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have known. You couldn't have known, I whispered into her hair. I barely figured it out myself. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Richard receive a 25-year sentence for embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and 2 counts of murder for hire. The judge called it a betrayal of the legal system's most sacred trust. Maria Gonzalez held my hand as the judge announced that all stolen settlement money would be returned to the families with interest and punitive damages. Sarah had deferred Northwestern for a year to attend community college, saying she wanted to earn her way honestly and figure out who she was without Richard's money. She also started volunteering with families fighting for workplace safety reforms, using her experience to help other victims of legal corruption. I learned something important, she told me that night over dinner in our small apartment, which somehow felt bigger now that honesty lived there. Trying isn't always enough, but never giving up on what's right, that's everything. The missing graduation dinner had led us to something more valuable than any celebration: the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the greatest gift a father can give his daughter, even when it costs everything else. Justice wasn't just served, it was earned by families who refused to let greed silence their voices, by fathers who chose the harder path, by daughters who learned that real success isn't measured in dollars stolen from the desperate. Roberto's boys got their father's settlement and their chance at college. Maria found peace, knowing her husband's death meant something. And I got my daughter back, not through money or gifts, but through the kind of integrity that can't be bought or sold. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. For more incredible true stories that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to stay silent.